Hey guys, if you like my videos, please like and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it, thanks. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a chilling new story when it drops. The Margrave family was the kind of story small towns like Stillwater, Montana thrive on. Everyone knew of them: Professor Malachi Margrave, his wife Clara, and their two children, Emily and Theo. They had come to the area nearly a decade ago, quiet and reclusive, with the enigmatic charm of outsiders who kept their secrets locked tight. Malachi, a physicist with a reputation for eccentric theories, had retired from academia to live off the grid. It wasn't long before rumors began to swirl. The Margraves had built a state-of-the-art underground bunker in the woods, concealed by layers of cement, steel, and dirt. Some said it was a survivalist retreat, prepared for a coming apocalypse. Others whispered of experiments, dangerous and unnatural, that Malachi conducted away from prying eyes. 5 years ago, during a particularly harsh winter, the Margraves disappeared. When no one had seen or heard from them for months, local authorities were called to investigate. They found the family's property abandoned, the entrance to the bunker sealed shut. No one could get inside. The case went cold, the Margraves became a legend, and life in Stillwater went on. Alex Price heard about the Margraves during his first week in town. He was a freelance documentarian who specialized in uncovering lost stories, urban legends, forgotten tragedies, and the kind of mysteries that kept people awake at night. Stillwater had seemed like the perfect setting for his next project: an isolated town, a tight-knit community, and a ghost story with just enough truth to make it tantalizing. He sat in a diner on Main Street, his dog Harley curled up under the booth, listening to the locals share their tales. An older man with a plaid jacket and a cigarette-stained voice was the most forthcoming. "I tell you," the man said, leaning in conspiratorially, "there's something wrong with that bunker. Sheriff Henderson said it was sealed tight when they found it, but I know a guy who went poking around out there. Said he heard things, voices, scratching, lights flickering in the trees at night." "Voices?" Alex asked, scribbling in his notebook. The man nodded. "Weird stuff, like a child crying, but real faint, like it was coming from underground." Alex glanced at Harley, who had perked up at the sound of the man's voice. "You believe it?" The man shrugged, his expression guarded. "Don't know, but I wouldn't go out there if I were you." The idea of the Margrave bunker stuck with Alex. He spent the next few days digging through old newspaper articles and talking to anyone willing to share what they knew. The more he learned, the more fascinated he became. Malachi Margrave wasn't just a survivalist, he was a man obsessed with ideas that most would dismiss as fringe science. He had published papers on dimensional physics, energy harnessing, and concepts Alex barely understood. Clara, by contrast, was described as warm and practical, the stabilizing force of the family. But even she hadn't been able to stop Malachi's descent into obsession, if the rumors were true. The turning point came when Alex found a police report detailing the investigation into the Margrave disappearance. Most of it was routine: interviews with neighbors, a description of the abandoned property, but one detail stood out. A deputy had written, "The bunker entrance appeared to have been forcibly opened from the inside. No signs of the Margrave family, but the interior remains unexplored due to structural concerns and unusual heat signatures detected on thermal imaging." Unusual heat signatures? Alex felt his pulse quicken. Whatever had happened in that bunker, it wasn't as simple as a family fleeing in the night. On a crisp October morning, Alex packed his gear: camera, flashlight, notebook, and a few basic tools, and set out with Harley to find the bunker. The directions were vague, pieced together from interviews and old maps, but he was confident he could locate it. The woods around Stillwater were dense and wild, the kind of place where you could get lost if you weren't careful. Alex kept Harley close, his leash clipped to Alex's belt as they navigated the overgrown trails. The air was cool and heavy with the earthy scent of fallen leaves, and the only sounds were the crunch of his boots and the occasional rustle of wildlife in the underbrush. After 2 hours of searching, Alex spotted something unusual: a patch of ground that looked unnaturally smooth, the vegetation sparse. He knelt down, brushing aside leaves and dirt, revealing a large steel door embedded in the earth. The door was rusted and weathered, its surface marred by deep scratches that looked like claw marks. A faint hum emanated from within, so low it was more a vibration than a sound. "This has to be it," Alex muttered, his heart pounding. Harley sniffed the door, his ears flattening as he let out a low growl. "Easy, boy," Alex said, though he felt a similar unease creeping over him. He pushed against the door, and to his surprise, it moved. The rusted hinges groaned in protest, but the door opened just enough for him to slip inside. The air inside the bunker was cold and stale, carrying a faint metallic tang that made Alex's stomach churn. He turned on his flashlight, the beam slicing through the darkness to reveal a narrow corridor lined with exposed pipes and cables. Harley hesitated at the entrance, whining softly. "Come on, buddy," Alex coaxed. "It's just a story, right?" The dog followed reluctantly, his claws clicking against the concrete floor. As Alex moved deeper into the bunker, the sense of unease grew. The walls were covered in strange marks, scratches and smudges that looked deliberate, like someone had been trying to write or draw but gave up halfway through. At the end of the corridor, the space opened into a larger room, and Alex stopped in his tracks. The room was a chaotic mess. Furniture lay overturned, papers were scattered across the floor, and a thick layer of dust coated everything. The scene was eerily still, as though frozen in time. On a table in the center of the room sat a leather-bound journal. Alex approached cautiously, picking it up and brushing off the dust. The first page bore a name written in neat cursive, Clara Margrave. The journal's leather cover was cracked and worn, its pages slightly yellowed from age. Alex opened it carefully, his flashlight illuminating the neat handwriting that filled the first page. March 3rd, 2017. "We've been in the bunker for 6 months now, and it's beginning to feel like home. The children are adjusting better than I expected, though Theo misses the open sky. Malachi keeps busy with his work, which helps keep his mind occupied. He's been so preoccupied with his experiments that I've taken over the day-to-day responsibilities. The quiet here is soothing. It feels safe." The calm tone of the entry seemed at odds with the disarray of the room. Alex flipped ahead, scanning for anything that might hint at what had happened to the Margraves. As he skimmed the pages, the entries grew darker, Clara's words hinting at tension and unease. May 9th, 2017. Malachi's experiments are becoming more intrusive. He insists on using the lower levels for his work, keeping the children and me upstairs, but I've caught Theo wandering down there more than once. Malachi says it's harmless, but he won't let me see what he's doing. There's something off about the air lately. It feels heavier, and sometimes I hear faint sounds in the night. Malachi says I'm imagining things, but I don't think I am. A chill ran down Alex's spine. The mention of the lower levels piqued his curiosity, but he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was down there was better left undisturbed. He set the journal aside and began exploring the room. The furniture was sturdy but worn, the signs of a once comfortable living space now reduced to disarray. A set of bunk beds lined one wall, their sheets rumpled and stained. Toys and books lay scattered across the floor, forgotten. Near the far wall, Alex spotted a map pinned to a corkboard. It showed a schematic of the bunker with its levels labeled Level 1, Quarters Level 2, Workshop Level 3, Storage Level 4, Core. The bottommost level, the core, was circled in red ink. Beside it, someone had scrawled a single word, danger. Harley's low growl broke the silence. The dog stood near the entrance to another corridor, his ears pinned back and his body tense. "What is it, boy?" Alex asked, moving closer. Harley's growl deepened, his gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the doorway. Alex swung his flashlight into the corridor, revealing a narrow, sloping passage that disappeared into the shadows. A faint sound reached Alex's ears, a soft rhythmic tapping, like metal against concrete. It was distant but unmistakable. "Probably just loose pipes," Alex muttered, though the explanation didn't convince even himself. He crouched beside Harley, scratching the dog behind his ears. "Stay close, okay?" Harley whimpered, but followed as Alex stepped into the corridor. The air grew colder as they descended, the walls damp and streaked with rust. The faint tapping grew louder, interspersed with occasional creaks and groans that echoed unnaturally. Alex couldn't tell if the sounds were coming from the pipes or something else entirely. The corridor ended at another door, this one heavier and more industrial than the one above. Scratches covered its surface, their erratic patterns more aggressive than those on the walls above. Alex hesitated, his hand hovering over the latch. A part of him wanted to turn back, to leave the bunker and forget the Margraves entirely. But the other part, the part driven by curiosity and the need for answers, pushed him forward. The latch moved easily under his hand and the door swung open with a hiss. The room beyond was larger than he expected, its ceiling high and arched. Rows of shelves filled with tools and equipment lined the walls, and the floor was scattered with wires, screws, and scraps of metal. A faint blue light pulsed in the far corner, casting flickering shadows that made the room feel alive. Alex stepped inside cautiously, his flashlight sweeping the space. Harley stayed close, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. The shelves were filled with an assortment of strange objects, pieces of machinery that looked too advanced for any ordinary workshop. Blueprints covered one table, their surfaces marked with intricate diagrams and notes written in Malachi's dense handwriting. Alex picked up one of the blueprints, squinting at the unfamiliar symbols and equations. The title scrawled across the top read, "Dimensional Aperture Prototype." "What the hell were you working on?" Alex muttered, setting the blueprint aside. The pulsing blue light drew his attention. It came from a large device in the corner, its surface smooth and metallic, with tubes and wires snaking out from its base. The light seemed to throb in time with the faint hum that filled the room, a rhythm that Alex could feel in his chest. As he approached, a sudden wave of unease washed over him. The air around the device felt charged, like the atmosphere before a lightning storm. Harley barked sharply, his body rigid as he backed away from the machine. "It's okay, boy," Alex said, though his own voice was shaky. He reached out to touch the device, but stopped short when he noticed something on the floor beside it. A small, shriveled handprint burned into the concrete. Alex's breath caught in his throat. The handprint was too small to belong to an adult, and the edges were charred, as though burned into the surface. The tapping sound returned, louder now and coming from directly above him. Alex swung his flashlight upward, the beam catching movement in the shadows near the ceiling. For a brief moment he saw it, a dark, angular shape that seemed to ripple and twist as it moved. Before he could react, the shape disappeared, melting into the darkness as if it had never been there. "Come on, Harley," Alex said, his voice trembling. "We're leaving." He backed toward the door, his flashlight darting across the room in frantic, jerky motions. The tapping sound continued, now accompanied by a faint mechanical whirring that seemed to follow him. As he stepped into the corridor, the air seemed to shift, growing colder and heavier. Harley barked again, the sound sharp and panicked, and Alex broke into a run, the dog close at his heels. Whatever had been in that room wasn't natural, and Alex had the sinking feeling that it wasn't done with him yet. Alex and Harley retreated to the relative safety of the upper level, their footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. The cold, damp air clung to Alex's skin, and he struggled to steady his breathing. Harley remained alert, his ears swiveling at every sound, his eyes scanning the shadows. The room with Clara's journal felt oddly welcoming compared to the ominous depths below. Alex sat heavily on an overturned crate, pulling the journal back into his hands. He needed a moment to think, to make sense of what he'd seen and felt. He flipped through the journal again, this time searching for any mention of the strange device he had encountered. Clara's entries grew more frantic as the pages progressed, her neat handwriting turning jagged and erratic. June 1st, 2017. Malachi won't let me into the workshop anymore. He says it's for my own safety, but I can hear him down there at all hours, muttering to himself. Sometimes I hear other voices too, but they're faint, like echoes of a conversation I can't quite catch. Theo has been asking questions. He wants to know why Daddy spends so much time downstairs. I don't have answers for him. I'm starting to think I don't want to know. July 4th, 2017. I went down there today. Malachi wasn't home and I needed to see for myself. The air was so heavy I could barely breathe. And that machine, it doesn't feel right. The light it gives off makes the shadows move in ways they shouldn't. I don't understand it, but I know it's dangerous. When Malachi found out, he was furious. He told me to stay away, said I couldn't possibly understand what he was doing. He looked scared. I've never seen him like that before. Alex closed the journal, his hands trembling. Clara's fear practically bled from the pages. Whatever Malachi had been working on, it wasn't just science. It was something else, something that defied the natural order of things. Harley barked softly, drawing Alex's attention. The dog stood at the entrance to the room, his body tense, his gaze fixed on the dark corridor beyond. "You sense it too, don't you?" Alex murmured, scratching Harley behind the ears. The faint tapping sound returned, barely audible but unmistakable. It echoed from below, a rhythmic pattern that set Alex's teeth on edge. He glanced at the schematic pinned to the corkboard, his eyes lingering on the label for Level 3, storage. "Looks like we're going deeper," he said, trying to summon a confidence he didn't feel. The descent to Level 3 was even more unnerving than the previous trip. The air grew colder with every step, and the faint hum that had permeated the bunker now carried a subtle vibration. The storage level was vast, its rows of shelves stretching into darkness. The flashlight beam revealed stacks of supplies, canned food, water barrels, and crates filled with tools and equipment. Everything was coated in a fine layer of dust, undisturbed for years. "Looks like they were planning to stay down here a long time," Alex muttered, his voice echoing eerily. Harley sniffed at the floor, his nose darting from one spot to another. Alex followed him, scanning the shelves for anything unusual. The further they moved into the storage area, the more disarray they encountered. Boxes lay overturned, their contents spilled across the floor. Shelves were toppled, their supports bent as though crushed by something heavy. Alex stopped abruptly, his flashlight illuminating a section of the floor covered in dark, oily stains. The liquid had pooled in uneven patches, its surface shimmering faintly. "What is this?" he whispered, crouching to get a closer look. The stains looked fresh, though the air was too cold for anything to have recently leaked. The smell was metallic and acrid, like blood mixed with burnt plastic. Harley growled low in his throat, his body rigid. "Okay, we're not alone," Alex said, his pulse quickening. The sound of movement reached Alex's ears, a faint shuffling, like something dragging itself across the floor. He swung the flashlight toward the noise, catching a brief glimpse of a shadow flitting between the shelves. "Hello?" he called, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. No response. The shuffling grew louder, accompanied by the faint tapping that had haunted him since entering the bunker. It wasn't random anymore. It was deliberate, almost rhythmic, like a signal or a code. Alex backed away slowly, keeping the flashlight trained on the darkness ahead. Harley stayed close, his growl deepening as the sounds drew nearer. Then he saw it. A figure emerged from the shadows, its form twisted and unnatural. It moved with a jerky, uneven gait, its limbs bent at impossible angles. The flashlight beam revealed pale, waxy skin stretched taut over jagged bones, and its face, or what should have been its face, was a smooth, featureless expanse. Alex froze, his breath caught in his throat. The figure tilted its head as if studying him, its movements eerily deliberate. Harley barked furiously, lunging forward. Alex grabbed the dog's collar, pulling him back. "Stay back!" Alex shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. The figure didn't react. Instead, it raised one long, spindly arm and pointed toward the far end of the room. Alex followed its gesture with his flashlight, the beam landing on a heavy, reinforced door. The figure took a step back, melting into the shadows as quickly as it had appeared. Alex stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. He had two options: retreat to the safety of the upper levels, or follow the figure's silent command and open the door. He tightened his grip on Harley's leash and started walking toward the door. The reinforced door loomed before him, its surface covered in scratches and strange jagged symbols etched into the metal. The symbols seemed to shift under the light, their edges blurring and twisting as if alive. Alex hesitated, his hand hovering over the latch. "Here we go," he muttered, pushing the door open. The room beyond was enormous, its walls lined with machinery that pulsed faintly with blue light. The air was thick and oppressive, the metallic tang stronger than ever. At the center of the room was a circular platform, surrounded by cables and tubes that snaked across the floor like veins. A soft hum emanated from the platform, the sound resonating in Alex's chest. This was it, the heart of the bunker. And whatever had happened here wasn't over. The room radiated an unnatural energy that made Alex's skin crawl. The air was colder here, thick with a metallic tang that lingered in his throat. Harley whined softly, his tail tucked between his legs as he pressed close to Alex. The platform at the center of the room pulsed with a faint blue light, the cables and tubes surrounding it writhing slightly, as if alive. Machinery lined the walls, most of it dark and silent, but a few flickered with intermittent sparks of light. The hum that filled the room wasn't just a sound. It was a vibration that resonated deep in Alex's bones, making him feel unsteady. He approached cautiously, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. The platform was covered in strange symbols, etched into its surface with a precision that felt almost surgical. They looked like a language, but not one Alex had ever seen. "What the hell were you building, Malachi?" he muttered under his breath. Alex set his camera on a nearby console, angling it toward the platform. The lens glinted faintly in the blue light as he pressed record, capturing the scene for later review. He pulled Clara's journal from his bag, flipping through the pages until he found an entry that seemed to reference the strange machine. July 17th, 2017. "I begged Malachi to stop. Whatever he's doing, it's affecting us. It's affecting the children. Emily refuses to sleep in her bed anymore. She says she sees things in the corners of the room, things that disappear when she turns on the light. Theo hasn't spoken in days, and his nose won't stop bleeding. Malachi insists it's harmless, that the machine isn't fully operational yet, but he spends more and more time down there, talking to something. He says it's science, but I don't believe him anymore." The words sent a shiver down Alex's spine. Clara's fear was palpable, her handwriting growing more erratic with each entry. He flipped ahead, scanning for more clues. July 29th, 2017. "I heard it today, a voice coming from the machine. It wasn't Malachi's, it wasn't human. It whispered my name over and over until I thought I would lose my mind. I tried to confront Malachi, but he just smiled and told me everything was under control. He's lying, I know he is." Alex lowered the journal, his gaze drifting to the platform. The faint blue light seemed to flicker in response, almost as if it were aware of his presence. "Clara knew this was dangerous," he said to Harley, who whimpered in reply. The dog's ears perked up suddenly, his gaze snapping toward a darkened corner of the room. Alex turned, raising his flashlight, but saw nothing. The tapping sound returned, louder now and more deliberate. It echoed through the chamber, coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Alex moved cautiously, his flashlight sweeping the room. The sound of tapping grew more insistent, interspersed with faint whispers that sent chills racing down his spine. "Who's there?" he called, his voice trembling. The whisper stopped abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence. For a moment, Alex stood frozen, his breath shallow as he strained to listen. Then the light from the platform flared brighter, casting long, flickering shadows across the room. Alex turned back to the platform, his heart pounding. The symbols etched into its surface glowed faintly, their edges shifting and twisting as if alive. The tubes and cables surrounding it pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, and the hum grew louder, almost deafening. Harley barked sharply, snapping Alex out of his trance. "What the hell is happening?" Alex muttered, backing away from the platform. The machinery lining the walls began to stir, gears and pistons groaning to life after years of dormancy. Sparks flew from exposed wires, and the vibration in the air grew so intense that Alex felt as if the room itself might collapse. A sudden wave of nausea washed over him, and he stumbled, catching himself on a nearby console. His flashlight flickered, the beam wavering as he fought to steady it. The whispers returned, louder this time and more distinct. They weren't in English or any language Alex recognized, but their tone was unmistakable. They were pleading, desperate. The blue light from the platform coalesced into a faint, humanoid shape. It hovered above the surface, its edges indistinct and wavering like smoke. Alex's breath caught in his throat. "Malachi?" he whispered, though he knew the answer. The figure tilted its head, the motion unnaturally slow and deliberate. The whispers grew louder, overlapping in a chaotic cacophony that filled the room. Harley growled, his body rigid as he barked furiously at the figure. The light surged, and Alex felt a sudden pressure in his chest, as if something were squeezing the air from his lungs. The whispers intensified, and for a brief moment he thought he could make out words hidden within the noise. "Leave us." The figure flickered, its form collapsing into a shapeless mass of light before disappearing entirely. The whispers stopped, and the room fell into an uneasy silence. Alex staggered back, his heart pounding. His gaze darted to the journal still clutched in his hand. Clara's final entries flashed through his mind, her words a desperate warning. August 5th, 2017. The machine is alive. I know it is. Malachi says I'm being hysterical, but I've seen it move. I've heard it breathe. It watches us, listens to us. It knows we're here, and it wants more. I have to get the children out of here. I don't care what Malachi says. This place isn't safe. The machinery groaned again, the sound dragging Alex back to the present. The platform's light dimmed slightly, but the hum persisted, an ever-present reminder of the machine's power. "We need to get out of here," Alex said, his voice shaking. He grabbed Harley's leash and turned toward the door, his flashlight cutting through the shadows. As he stepped into the corridor, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The corridor leading away from the platform seemed darker than before, as if the light from Alex's flashlight was being swallowed by the shadows. Harley trotted close, his paws silent on the cold concrete, his occasional whimpers the only sound besides Alex's unsteady breathing. The whispers had stopped, but the oppressive hum persisted, vibrating through the walls and into Alex's bones. Every step deeper into the bunker seemed to tighten the invisible grip around his chest. Alex paused at a junction where the corridor split into two paths. One led upward to the relative safety of the upper levels, while the other descended into deeper shadows. His eyes fell on the schematic he'd found earlier, which he'd tucked into his pocket. He unfolded it, scanning the labels for guidance. Level 2, Workshop. The workshop had been the source of so much of Clara's fear and Malachi's obsession. If there were answers anywhere, it would be there. "This way, Harley," Alex murmured, guiding the dog down the sloping path. The workshop doors were tall and heavy, their rusted surfaces etched with more of the strange symbols Alex had seen elsewhere. He hesitated before pushing them open, the weight of dread pressing down on him. The room beyond was enormous, its high ceilings and wide floor space filled with machinery that looked simultaneously advanced and ancient. Tools hung from hooks along the walls, and workbenches were cluttered with half-assembled devices, many of them unrecognizable. The air was thicker here, tinged with a chemical scent that burned Alex's nostrils. The hum of the machinery was louder, and the vibrations seemed to pulse in time with his own heartbeat. Alex moved cautiously, his flashlight illuminating the chaos. A large table in the center of the room caught his attention. Its surface was covered with blueprints, notebooks, and scattered scraps of metal. He picked up one of the notebooks, flipping through its pages. The handwriting was Malachi's, dense and precise, filled with equations and technical diagrams. Log entry 112. The aperture is stable, but the fluctuations remain unpredictable. The readings suggest it is drawing energy from somewhere beyond our dimension. Clara doesn't understand. She doesn't see the potential. I must continue. The voices are a distraction, but they speak of things I can use. If I can perfect the aperture, it will change everything. Alex flipped ahead, skimming the increasingly frantic entries. Log entry 138. The first entity crossed through today. It was small, barely coherent in form, but its presence was unmistakable. The children saw it. I told them it was a trick of the light, but they knew better. Clara wants me to stop. She doesn't understand what's at stake. I can't stop. Not now. A cold knot formed in Alex's stomach. Entities? He whispered. He set the notebook down and scanned the rest of the table. Among the blueprints and notes was a detailed schematic of a machine labeled Dimensional Aperture Control Unit. The diagram showed the machine's components and their functions, but one section was marked with bold red lines and the word failsafe. Alex leaned closer, studying the notes scrawled in the margins. The failsafe appeared to be designed to sever the connection between the aperture and whatever it was linked to. A noise from the far end of the room snapped Alex's attention away from the table. It was faint at first, like the shuffling of fabric against metal, but it grew louder, closer. "Harley, stay," Alex whispered, gripping his flashlight tighter. He moved toward the source of the sound, his footsteps careful and deliberate. The light from his flashlight danced across the machinery, casting long, jagged shadows that seemed to move on their own. Then he saw it. In the corner of the room, slumped against a tangle of wires and pipes, was a figure. At first, Alex thought it was a mannequin. Its body was too rigid, its joints bent at unnatural angles. But as he approached, he realized it wasn't a mannequin at all. The figure was humanoid, but its skin was pale and waxy, stretched over an angular mechanical frame. Its eyes, if they could be called that, were hollow voids, and its mouth hung open in a silent scream. Alex froze, his breath catching in his throat. The figure didn't move, but there was something about its presence that felt wrong, as if it didn't belong in this world. "What are you?" Alex whispered. The figure twitched, its head jerking slightly to one side. Alex stumbled back, nearly dropping his flashlight. The hum of the machinery intensified, and the figure's body began to convulse. Sparks flew from the wires around it, and a high-pitched whine filled the room, growing louder and louder until Alex felt like his skull might split. "Come on, Harley," Alex shouted, turning and running for the door. The workshop erupted behind him, the sound of metal tearing and machinery screeching echoing through the corridor. Alex didn't stop running until he reached the junction, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Harley was at his side, his ears pinned back and his tail tucked between his legs. Alex leaned against the wall, clutching his knees as he tried to steady himself. "That thing, it wasn't alive," he muttered, shaking his head. "At least not in any way I understand." He glanced back down the corridor toward the workshop, where the faint glow of blue light still pulsed. The failsafe, the only thing that might stop this nightmare, was tied to the machine. If he wanted to end this, he'd have to go deeper. Alex didn't waste much time catching his breath. The deeper levels of the bunker seemed to pull at him, as if whatever lay below was aware of his presence, waiting for him to descend. His flashlight flickered weakly, and he smacked it against his palm, coaxing it back to life. Harley stuck close, his body low to the ground, his nose twitching at the stale air. "Come on, boy," Alex murmured. "Let's finish this." The corridor leading to level 4, core was narrower and steeper than the others. The walls were smoother, polished to a glassy sheen that reflected the faint light of Alex's flashlight in distorted patterns. The hum of the machinery was louder here, deeper and more resonant, vibrating through the walls and into Alex's chest. Every step felt heavier, as if the air itself were pushing back against him. At the bottom of the slope, Alex found another reinforced door. Unlike the others, this one was pristine, its surface unmarred by rust or scratches. The symbols etched into the metal glowed faintly, their edges pulsating with a rhythmic light that seemed to sync with the vibration in the air. Alex hesitated, his hand hovering over the latch. Harley growled softly, his gaze fixed on the door. "We don't have a choice," Alex said, more to himself than the dog. He pushed the door open, and the air inside hit him like a physical force, cold and thick, carrying a faint metallic tang that made him gag. The room beyond was massive, easily the largest space Alex had encountered in the bunker. The ceiling soared high above him, lost in shadow, and the walls were lined with massive conduits and pipes that snaked into the floor. At the center of the room was the rift. It wasn't what Alex had expected, not a swirling vortex of light and energy, but something far more unsettling. The rift was an irregular tear in the fabric of reality, its edges jagged and shifting as if it were alive. Beyond the tear was a void, black and infinite, with faint flickering lights that moved like distant stars. The air around the rift was distorted, rippling like heat waves, and the hum that had followed Alex through the bunker now seemed to emanate from the tear itself. Alex stepped closer, his heart pounding. The rift pulsed faintly, its light casting long, shifting shadows across the room. The closer he got, the heavier the air became, pressing down on him like an invisible weight. Harley barked sharply, snapping Alex out of his trance. "Right," Alex muttered, shaking his head. "Stay focused." A control panel stood near the rift, its surface cluttered with switches, levers, and glowing screens. Alex approached cautiously, his flashlight illuminating the intricate wiring that connected the panel to the rest of the machinery in the room. The screen displayed a single word in bold red letters: stabilized. Alex frowned. According to Malachi's notes, the rift was anything but stable. He scanned the controls, looking for the fail-safe mechanism mentioned in the workshop schematics. There it was, a small lever protected by a glass cover. A label above it read, "Fail-safe override." Alex reached for the lever but stopped when he heard it. A faint whispering, low and overlapping, coming from the rift. The whispers grew louder, their tone pleading and desperate. Alex strained to make out the words, but they were in a language he didn't recognize, their cadence almost melodic. "Do you hear that, Harley?" Alex asked, glancing at the dog. Harley growled, his eyes locked on the rift. His body was tense, every muscle ready to spring into action. The whispers shifted, their tone growing darker, angrier. Alex took a step back, his flashlight beam wavering. The rift pulsed violently and the room shook, sending vibrations through the floor that nearly knocked Alex off his feet. Then they emerged. The first harbinger stepped through the rift, its grotesque form flickering and distorted, as if it weren't fully part of this reality. Its limbs were long and jagged, a twisted amalgamation of flesh and metal that moved with unnerving precision. Its head tilted toward Alex, the faint glow of its hollow eyes locking onto him. Another harbinger followed, then another, their movements synchronized as they stepped into the room. Alex's breath caught in his throat. The harbingers didn't move like anything natural. Their limbs bent at impossible angles, their bodies twitching and pulsating, as if fighting to maintain their shape. One of them raised a spindly arm pointing directly at Alex. "Oh, hell no," Alex muttered, grabbing Harley and backing toward the control panel. The harbingers advanced, their movements slow but deliberate. Alex reached for the fail-safe lever, his hand trembling. Come on. The glass cover wouldn't budge. He cursed under his breath, fumbling for his multi-tool. The harbingers were closing in, their distorted forms casting long, jagged shadows across the room. With a desperate twist of his screwdriver, Alex popped the cover off the lever. He grabbed it and yanked hard, the lever locking into place with a resounding click. The screens on the control panel flashed red, and a loud mechanical voice filled the room. "Warning, core destabilization initiated." The rift pulsed violently, its edges flaring with blinding light. The harbingers stopped, their heads snapping toward the rift as if hearing a sound Alex couldn't perceive. The air grew heavier, the hum of the rift reaching an ear-splitting pitch. Alex grabbed Harley and ran for the door, the ground shaking beneath his feet. Behind him, the harbingers began to convulse, their bodies flickering and distorting as the rift's light engulfed them. Alex reached the corridor just as the room behind him erupted in chaos. The rift collapsed inward, pulling the harbingers with it. The walls cracked and groaned, chunks of concrete falling as the entire bunker began to implode. "Go, Harley," Alex shouted, sprinting up the corridor with the dog at his side. The bunker shuddered violently, the vibrations nearly knocking Alex off his feet. Dust and debris rained down, and the air filled with the deafening roar of collapsing metal and stone. Alex didn't stop running until he saw the faint light of the upper levels ahead. The roar of destruction chased Alex and Harley as they sprinted up the sloping corridor. The floor trembled beneath their feet, the vibrations growing stronger with every step. Alex's flashlight flickered wildly, the beam cutting erratically through the dust-filled air. "Almost there, boy," Alex shouted, though he wasn't sure if he was reassuring Harley or himself. The walls groaned and cracked, pieces of concrete falling in jagged chunks. The oppressive hum of the rift was gone, replaced by a cacophony of grinding metal and collapsing stone. Harley barked sharply, his paws skidding on the uneven floor as he struggled to keep up. Alex reached down, grabbing the dog's collar to steady him. "We're not dying down here," Alex muttered through gritted teeth. The corridor opened into the upper levels, and Alex's heart leapt at the sight of familiar surroundings. The bunk beds, the scattered toys, the table with Clara's journal. It all felt like a distant memory now, a remnant of a nightmare that was finally ending. But the bunker wasn't done with them yet. A deafening crash echoed from below, and Alex turned just in time to see a surge of dust and debris billowing up the corridor behind him. The implosion was gaining speed, consuming everything in its path. "Move!" Alex shouted, pulling Harley with him as they bolted toward the main entrance. The heavy steel door that had seemed so foreboding when Alex first arrived now felt like salvation. He reached it, his hands trembling as he pushed against the rusted metal. It didn't budge. "No, no, no," Alex shouted, slamming his shoulder into the door. The ground shook violently, and a deep guttural groan echoed through the bunker as another section collapsed. Dust filled the air, making it harder to breathe. Harley barked desperately, scratching at the door with his paws. Alex glanced around, his eyes landing on a nearby console. He remembered the schematic. There was a manual override for the door somewhere in the upper levels. "Stay with me, Harley," Alex said, racing to the console. The console was caked in dust and grime, its buttons and levers barely visible. Alex wiped it clean with his sleeve, his fingers searching for anything that looked like a release mechanism. His flashlight beam landed on a rusted lever labeled Door Override. With a grunt, Alex grabbed the lever and pulled. It resisted at first, the mechanism jammed from years of neglect, but he threw his weight into it, forcing it down. The sound of grinding metal filled the room as the door began to move, inching open with agonizing slowness. Come on, Alex urged, his gaze darting back to the corridor. The surge of debris was almost upon them, a churning wave of destruction that threatened to swallow everything. The door opened just wide enough for Alex and Harley to squeeze through. Alex shoved the dog through first, then scrambled after him, the roar of the implosion deafening in his ears. The moment he was clear, he turned and shoved the door shut, the finality of the sound echoing in the now quiet forest. Alex collapsed onto the ground outside, gasping for air. Harley lay beside him, his chest heaving, but his tail wagged weakly as if to say, "We made it." For a long moment Alex lay there, staring up at the canopy of trees overhead. The bunker was silent now, the hum and vibrations replaced by the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. He sat up slowly, his muscles aching, and looked back at the door. It was sealed shut once more, the edges warped and blackened from the destruction within. "It's over," Alex said aloud, though he wasn't entirely sure he believed it. Harley barked softly, nuzzling against Alex's leg. As Alex gathered his gear and prepared to leave, he couldn't help but glance back at the bunker one last time. The forest around it seemed unnaturally still, the air heavy with a sense of finality. He thought of Clara, of Malachi, of the horrors he'd seen below. The rift was gone, and with it the harbingers, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something had survived. "Come on, Harley," he said, patting the dog's head. "Let's go home."